Good evening. How y'all doing tonight? Well, here we go again. And before I get into the substance of my walk and talk, I wanted to share with you a little theism. The fabulous Fabian came up with this one yesterday because of Donald Trump questioning Kamala Harris's blackness. She said that if they ever face up against each other, like in a debate, and Trump brings this up and says something like, well, when did you turn black? Fabian says she should reply with, a lot longer ago than when you turned orange. I thought that was pretty good. I should forward that to her in case she gets an opportunity to do that. So, let's see. Did he rant about anything today? Let me think about that for a second, then because I did have some thoughts about J.D. Vance, and people are still talking about his comment about single women that are not having any kids and they're cat ladies. Now, J.D. Vance is Catholic. He converted to Catholicism. And I think I mentioned this in one of my walk-in talks about all the nuns and all the priests in this country who don't have kids. What about them? But you know, something even more important than that and widespread, I was thinking about when my wife and I raised our kids. We raised them through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And we weren't dirt poor, but we were definitely on the bottom of the income ladder, just getting enough to get by, pay our house payment, pay for food. We didn't have any health insurance. We had old cars. Fortunately, I was able to fix them. And hopefully I can tell you the story about the guy that taught me how to fix cars. That's kind of an interesting story. So during that time, we didn't have very much money, and we were just getting by taking care of our kids. We were very, very fortunate that none of them really had a serious health issue, although my son had a breathing problem one night. A virus got onto his epiglottis and closed up his epiglottis, so we had to rush him to the hospital. He was 4 years old, and we didn't have any insurance. But fortunately, the county paid for that. I can imagine how much that was. And he recovered very quickly, and I'll tell you that story sometime. And then my daughter, when she was probably 10 or so, she started having stomach pains, complaining about her stomach hurting, and we went to a bunch of doctors, and eventually they told us, you got to go to Loma Linda. You got to put a scope down there, take a look inside of her stomach, see if she's got an ulcer or something like that. We didn't have any insurance, and I think that was about $3,000, so we scraped the money together. By that time, I had the sign business going, and we had enough to pay for that. But my point in all of this is maybe one of the reasons that women are not having as many kids is because they flat can't afford it. Think of a couple today. They can't afford to buy a house. And so J.D. Vance expects them to have kids. And they're thinking, that'd be pretty unfair to the kid. If we can't find a place to live, we're going to end up being homeless, and that's on the kids. So there's a deeper problem here, JV. And I know you don't really understand it because you graduated from Yale and you have a net worth of $10 million. So you can have as many kids as you want, like Elon Musk. But try to have a little bit of empathy and understanding as to why somebody wouldn't want to bring any kids into this world because they can't pay for them, because of the incredible income inequity that exists in this country, because of people like you. You're an investment banker, and your net worth is $10 million, and you've got the gall to scold women for not having enough kids. It's pretty disgusting. So, let's see, there was something on the Trumpster. Can't remember exactly what it was. He said something that at that rally down there in Atlanta that was just bat blank crazy. Maybe it'll come to me a little bit later. So, I think I'm going to give you a little quick history about myself and how I learned how to fix cars, because that was an important part of my history, and Not only did it allow me to fix my own cars, but I was able to fix other people's cars and get paid for it too. We moved up to Northern California. I think I told you the story. It's about 1970. We moved up there. We opened a restaurant up. There was a restaurant there that had been closed down. All the equipment was in there. We found the owner, made a deal with him to open it up, and operated it through the summer. And while we were there was a lot of people in the community that came in to the restaurant and got to know him. And one of the people that came in there was a guy by the name of Charlie Cowles. And Charlie was a motorcycle mechanic in Placerville at a motorcycle shop there. And his wife, Della, eventually ended up working for us in the restaurant as a waitress. So when I found out Charlie was a mechanic, I had a Volkswagen Bug at that time, and I was having some problems with it. The engine was getting worn out, and it was going to need a rebuild and such. And man, I didn't know the first thing. I didn't know how to. I could probably change the spark plugs, maybe the ignition points, but that was it. I'd never taken an engine out of a car. I'm 25 years old maybe or so. Never took any mechanical classes in school. My dad didn't know anything about that stuff. So I meet this guy, Charlie Cowles, and I tell him, I'm having these problems. I said, can you help me? He says, yeah. He said, just bring it over to the house, and after I get off work, after I have dinner, I'll show you how to do it. He says, I'm not going to turn the wrenches. I'll sit there and I'll point and I'll explain to you what to do. But I turn the wrenches all day. And so when I come home, I don't want to do that. I said, that sounds great. So he told me how to take the motor out of the car, explained that to me. I took that out at the restaurant and brought the motor over to his house and set it on his kitchen table. Volkswagen motor's not very big. So we disassembled the motor. I disassembled it. He told me how to do it. He had a lot of the tools and explained everything to me. And I'll tell you, after we got that thing apart, there are so many parts. I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, God, I'll never get that back together. But that wasn't the case. Gradually he says, okay, now you do this, and you have to do this, and you got to make sure the rods, you have the notch up in the correct direction, and you got to notch those spots there so they don't come apart when you start up, and you got to have 2,000 oil clearance there between the bearings and the crankshaft. And he's just teaching me all this stuff. And at that time, man, my mind was just like a sponge. I was just soaking it up. And by the time I got done doing that car, I had a real solid, basic understanding of how internal combustion engines work, because they're all kind of the same. A Volkswagen was air-cooled and other cars are water-cooled, but the basic principles of how they work, if they're gasoline motors, it's pretty simple from one engine to another. So eventually when we moved from Coloma down to Joshua Tree, I started a little Volkswagen repair business in my garage. Put a little ad in the newspaper, local newspaper, and before you know it, I had somebody call me up. A family that turned out to be just the best people to me. A couple by the name of Hayes and Ruth Robbins. They were probably in their 60s, and they had a house in Morongo Valley, and they were both kind of retired. And they had a family. They had 5 kids. All the kids were grown up and moved out. And I'll never forget going to the guy's house, and he's got this Volkswagen. I think it was, I'm trying to remember if it was a squareback. It was like a 68 squareback Volkswagen. The motor's basically the same as the one that was in the Bug that I had, air-cooled engine, but it had fuel injection instead of carbureted. So he wanted to get it rebuilt and get it running. So I told him, okay, well, the parts are probably going to be about $250, $300, and then the labor will be about the same. So he writes me out a check for $300 right there. And he says, go ahead and get all the parts and get it going, and then as you progress along, I'll pay you money for the labor part, so you'll have some money. Now, this guy does not know me from Adam. Never met me before. My hair is long. I'm kind of like in my hippie phase, but he's just as kind and trusting as can be. Writes me out this check, and that got me started. And then before long, people are calling me and word of mouth, just getting around. And I did mobile. So I just take my car out to their house and do oil changes and valve adjustments and change out batteries. Now, if they needed the motor overhauled, we'd bring it over to the house in Joshua Tree to the garage. And I'd take it out there and take it apart. And take the parts down to Orange County. There's a machine shop down there that specialized in Volkswagen stuff. And they would take care of that. So that's where I cut my teeth in auto repair. And boy, has that ever served me well over the years. Because all those years when we just didn't have any money, there's no way that I could have afforded to have somebody fix my car. Even back in those days, it wasn't cheap because it's a skilled thing. And there's a feeling of, I don't know, satisfaction when you can fix your own car. You know, when it makes a noise or just won't start. And there's a process that you go through. And when you get it started and you do it for somebody else and they're stuck somewhere and they call you, oh, my car quit on me. You go out there and all it is the battery terminals are a little corroded, or the ignition points are not opening, or a wire fell off, or there's something in the carburetor that's plugging the fuel. These things can all be diagnosed really quickly and fixed really quickly. And there's plenty of times, I had regular customers like that would call me, and I'd go out and I'd just fix it. I wouldn't charge them anything. You know, get out of here. It only took me 15 minutes. So that's how you build a business. And that was kind of an epiphany, meeting Charlie there in the restaurant. And of course, he loved motorcycles. And he and another guy, actually two other guys who were friends of his, they each bought a brand new, it's called an MZ, a motorcycle that was built in East Germany. These three guys each bought one brand new in a crate. They're like $500. And so one of the three guys who came in the restaurant, I met him. He had one of these MZs and he said, you know, I'd like to sell it. And I said, cool, I'll buy that thing. And I think I probably paid him $500 for it. It had hardly any miles on it. So I'd never had a motorcycle before. I never even, well, I don't want to say I'd never ridden one. I can remember riding on a couple of Honda 250 Scramblers, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge with a motorcycle. And this one was a two-stroke motorcycle. So I wanted to show Faye how to drive it, you know. And it's kind of an awkward bike. It's pretty heavy. So took her down to the parking lot where where the sawmill is, where Marshall discovered gold back in 1849. Took her down there to the parking lot like on a Sunday when there was nobody there, because I figured she can't run into anything here. So she gets on the motorcycle and we get it going, and she putts around in this parking lot. And she's going like under 10 miles an hour for sure. So it eventually dies on her and I can't get it started. And this is before I had very much mechanical knowledge. So I pushed the bike back home, back to the restaurant. We were living in the restaurant at the time. Pushed it back there, and Charlie comes in the restaurant a couple days later to get some coffee. And I said, hey, Charlie, I said, you know, I got the MZ. We were riding it the other night and it just quit on me. Faye was riding it in the parking lot and it just quit. He said, okay. He says, get it out here in the parking lot of the restaurant. So I get it out there. He says, take the spark plug out. So I take the spark plug out and he says, now put it in first gear. You're not on the motorcycle. Stand off the motorcycle, hold on to the handlebars. You got the spark plug out. It's just a single cylinder. It's a two-stroke, 250. Okay. And you got it in first gear, right? Yeah. He says, okay, push it around the parking lot. Do some circles, just running with it. So I push this motorcycle and go put, 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 put. So, okay, I do that for a couple minutes. He says, okay, put spark plug back in there. So I put the spark plug in, turn it on, push down on the kickstart, see if it'll start. Boom, starts right up. He says it was just loaded up with gasoline because you were driving it so slow. It just loaded the spark plug up and got spark plug wet and it wouldn't spark. Just such a simple little thing. Things like that you just file them away in the file. But So Charlie goes on to tell me about his love of motorcycles, and he tells me this story about the first motorcycle that he had. He said he was 15 years old, and he got this motorcycle, and he said, I lived at the top of this hill, I think in Oakland. And he says, man, I got on that motorcycle. He says, I was so excited that I forgot to ask where the brakes were. He says, man, I went down this hill, and he said, I ran into, I forget, it was a tree or a car or something like that. He says, I knocked my front teeth out. He says, man, he says, it wrecked the bike. He says, I couldn't wait to get another motorcycle. He had that much love for motorcycles. And I mean, he could just, anything that was mechanical, any kind of motor, didn't matter if it was diesel, gasoline, 2-stroke, 4-stroke, whatever. He was just remarkable. But the weird thing was, Charlie could not read. So he would get these service manuals, and his wife, Della, would read the manual to him, and then he would do his thing on anything that was new that he hadn't worked on before. So Charlie Cowles was one of those people that had a tremendous influence on my life. And I was able to keep my head above water through those difficult years. So let's see, anything else? Let's see, how much time are we into here? My goodness, we're in almost 17 minutes already. That's probably enough for tonight. So tomorrow should be a pretty big day, because it sounds like Kamala Harris is going to announce her VP candidate. And as I've said before, I hope that it's Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. This guy's a winner. I mean, no matter who she picks from the people that she has there, it's going to be excellent. Josh Spiro, I want to say Spiro, that's not his last name. The guy that's the governor of Pennsylvania. Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. Bashir, the governor of, I think it's Kentucky. These people are all excellent. I just think that Walz is the quickest witted one of all of them. And he's got a really good, of course, Mark Kelly's got a heck of a pedigree too. Astronaut, in the military, senator. He's got that thing where he's married to Gabby Giffords, that kind of stuff. So I don't think it'll matter too much, but Walz is my favorite, so I'm hoping for him. So we will know probably by this time tomorrow night, and we will talk about that then. So once again, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate your company. Bye-bye.